What would you do if the justice system failed you, sentenced you to life in prison, and you knew your only chance of survival was a powerful secret nobody knew about? A cold, steel courtroom, the air thick with tension. Guilty. The gavel slams down, sealing the fate of a woman who didn't deserve this life sentence. The name is Lyla Carter, a mother, a daughter, and a wife to someone you would never expect. A black woman caught in a web of lies and injustice. But little does the racist judge know. Lyla's husband is not just any man. He is Michael Carter, the mayor of Stanton City, a city controlled by power and corruption. What happens when a mayor fights for his family's freedom? The fight for justice is about to begin, but with the clock ticking, is it too late to save Lyla, or has the system already betrayed them both? The moment fades in on a quiet suburban street at dawn. Birds chirp in the trees, and the sun casts a soft glow over the neighborhood. A modest home stands, perfectly kept with flowers blooming in the front yard. The camera zooms in through a window, revealing the interior, warm and lived in, filled with the sound of soft chatter and laughter.
Told you, we can't do this in a month after.
Lyla Carter, a woman of strength and grace, is in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for her 2 children. Her hands move with purpose, a mother's rhythm as she sets plates on the table. Her son Jamal, a bright-eyed 10-year-old, rushes into the room, his backpack slung haphazardly over his shoulder. Lyla, slow down, Jamal. You're not going anywhere until you've had something to eat. Her voice is soothing yet firm, the way only a mother's voice can be. As she looks over at her daughter, Amara, a teen with her mother's fiery spirit, Lyla's eyes soften with love. Cobwebs away. Don't think you can skip out on breakfast either, young lady. Mara rolls her eyes but obeys, taking a seat at the table. Lyla's smile fades as she watches her children, a fleeting moment of uncertainty crossing her face. Her life has been anything but easy. A single mother trying to make ends meet after the sudden death of her own mother years ago, Lyla had always vowed to raise her children with love and dignity, no matter the odds. Yet, despite her nurturing nature, her world is about to fall apart. Her hands tremble slightly as she pours juice into a glass, a subtle sign of the internal battle raging within her. Lyla had always been the rock of the family, the one who held everything together, no matter how much life had tried to tear her down. But now, that rock is shaking, and she knows it. Lyla is not just a mother, she is a woman with dreams and aspirations of her own. Once an aspiring social worker, she had been forced to put her career on hold after having children. Still, she was determined to make a better life for them. Over the years, she built a small community center for struggling families, offering counseling and resources for people in need. Lyla's passion for helping others was infectious, and she became a pillar in her community, a woman everyone turned to for guidance. But now her life is crumbling. In an unexpected twist of fate, Lyla was wrongfully accused of a brutal crime she didn't commit, a robbery gone wrong, involving a store in the heart of Stanton City. The police found no evidence to tie her to the crime, yet the district attorney, driven by his own biases, pushed for her conviction, knowing full well the racism embedded in the system. Lyla's public defender did little to help her, leaving her defenseless against the storm that was about to descend upon her. The moment cuts to Lyla walking into the courtroom, her steps heavy with fear, but also determination. The gavel slams down, and her heart races. She tries to steady her breath, but her mind is a whirlwind. She knows that being a black woman in a system designed to break people like her puts her at a severe disadvantage. Her body stiffens as the judge, a man with a cold, indifferent gaze, looks down at her with disdain. His eyes flicker momentarily with something that could only be described as contempt. This is not just a courtroom. This is the battleground for Lyla's life, her future. The weight of the moment presses down on her chest as she thinks of her children, her precious Jamal and Amara, who will be left alone if this court doesn't find her innocent. She couldn't bear the thought of them growing up without her, of them believing she had abandoned them. Lyla, once a woman full of hope and dreams, now stands in front of the system that has cast her aside. She's terrified, but deep down, she knows she can't give up. Not now, not ever. I can't lose them. I can't lose myself. These words echo in her mind as she hears the prosecutors speak, listing out her supposed crimes, each accusation like a blow to her heart. How had things gone so wrong? Why did the system choose her to scapegoat? And what would happen to her children if she were locked away forever? Cut to Michael Carter, the mayor of Stanton City, walking briskly into his office at City Hall. The camera follows him as he exchanges firm handshakes with staff, his authoritative presence unmistakable. Michael is a man who has clawed his way to the top, fighting political enemies and building a reputation as someone who gets things done. He's sharp, strategic, and used to wielding power. Michael is sitting at his desk, signing papers that will affect the future of the city. His office, adorned with high-end furniture, is filled with city maps, photographs of him at community events, and a family portrait with Lyla at the center. His children's smiling faces radiate from the frame. But there is an unease in Michael's demeanor that day, a slight edge to his calm. He's receiving a phone call, a message about Lyla's trial, something that could change everything for him. Everything for them. And, Your Honor, this is a critical situation. You cannot ignore what's happening. The voice on the other end is filled with urgency, but Michael remains focused on the case before him. At that moment, the weight of the situation starts to dawn on him. His wife is facing life imprisonment for a crime she didn't commit, the scandal that could break out if anyone finds out, and the secret that neither of them wanted to keep hidden. He'd always kept Lyla's struggles separate from his political life, hoping never to mix the two. But now, their worlds are colliding in a way he never imagined. The courtroom is a suffocating mix of tension and anticipation. The overhead lights shine coldly down on Judge Alvin Halloway, a man whose face is a mask of indifference, his eyes clouded by years of power and prejudice. He is sitting high above, on a throne of judgment, as if the fate of Lyla Carter's life is nothing more than a passing inconvenience. Judge Alvin is known for his unyielding convictions, but it's more than just the law that guides his decisions. Lyla, a black woman, stands in front of him, her case barely a blip in the agenda of a man who has sent countless people to prison, often for crimes they didn't commit. The smirk on his face as he watches Lyla's defense team struggle against the overwhelming odds is telling. He doesn't even bother to hide his distaste when the defense attorney, a public defender with little time or resources, attempts to introduce new evidence, pleading for a fair chance. This is a waste of time. We all know where this is heading. Just get on with it, Judge Alvin Halloway said dismissively. His words are sharp, cutting through the room like a cold wind. The courtroom murmurs in disbelief. Lyla's lawyer hesitates, looking between the judge and the crowd of spectators, some of whom are already whispering about the case. Lyla stands there, her hands trembling slightly as she grips the edge of the table, trying not to collapse under the weight of Alvin's disdain. She's heard the whispers, the rumors about how Montgomery treats cases like hers, how, in his eyes, she's just another statistic, another black woman guilty by association, no matter the evidence. Lyla tries to ignore the sickness in her stomach. She focuses on her children's faces, remembering the way they looked at her before she left for the courthouse that morning. She's doing this for them. For Jamal, who needs his mother's love, and Amara, who's already lost too much in her young life. Judge Alvin's behavior grows more erratic as the trial drags on. His bias becomes apparent to everyone in the room, even the gallery of observers, many of whom have begun to shake their heads in disbelief at the unfolding spectacle. As Lyla's defense attorney brings forward the key witness, Kenneth Hayes, a man who could potentially clear her name by providing a solid alibi, Alvin silences him before he even finishes his testimony. The witness's words don't matter to Alvin Because the truth isn't what he's interested in. He's interested in maintaining power, in upholding a system that lets him pick and choose who gets justice and who doesn't. Your alibi is irrelevant. She's guilty because I say she is. The facts, the truth, they don't matter, Judge Alvin interrupted. His voice oozes with superiority, the kind that comes from years of knowing he can make or break lives with the flick of his gavel. He doesn't care about the evidence. He doesn't care about Lyla's story or the toll this is taking on her family. He cares only about his own power and the comfortable life he's built by crushing those who dare to challenge the system. The tension in the courtroom reaches a boiling point. Lyla's heart pounds in her chest as she watches the prosecutor, a man named Thomas Crane, who leans into his closing arguments with a venomous zeal. He paints Lyla as a criminal mastermind, ignoring the obvious flaws in his case, framing her as nothing more than a pawn in a larger narrative of crime. You see, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it's clear that Lyla Carter was not the innocent woman she pretends to be. Her connection to the robbery may be more complex than we realize. Maybe she's not the mastermind, but she knew what was going on. She is complicit. Prosecutor Crane said with mocking confidence. Lyla's body goes numb. She stares at Crane, his words ringing in her ears. The injustice is suffocating, but it's Montgomery's quiet nodding that truly devastates her. Every decision he makes pushes her closer to the fate she fears most, the lifetime she'll spend behind bars. But there's a moment, just a fleeting one, where Lyla feels something deep inside her rise. This is not just about her anymore. This is about her children. This is about her future. She won't let him destroy them. She won't let him take everything from her. And the narrator, who is, I guess you could say, the Glinda, the center of the story. Meanwhile, across town, Michael Carter, the mayor, is in the middle of a meeting with his city's development council. The room is filled with faces he recognizes, the people who depend on his decisions to shape the future of Stanton City. But Michael's focus is elsewhere. The weight of his wife's trial presses down on him. He's kept his distance from the case, trusting the justice system to do its job. But as the news of the trial spreads through the city, whispers of corruption and racial bias surface. Reporters and police leave the city. A phone rings on Michael's desk, shattering his concentration. He answers, his voice calm but with a hint of tension. His assistant's voice is frantic, almost panicked. Assistant. Mayor Carter, you need to get to the courthouse now. The verdict is about to be read. It doesn't look good. The judge has already made up his mind. He's going to convict her. Michael's heart stops. What? The words are a punch to his gut. He drops the phone on the desk, his mind racing. He stands up, his chair scraping against the floor as he storms toward the door. In the courtroom, Lyla's legs feel weak beneath her as the final moments of the trial unfold. The words of the prosecutor and judge blur together. It feels like the room is closing in around her. Alvin's gavel rises, and the final blow is imminent. The jury has already made its decision. Guilty. The words echo in her mind like a death sentence. She has fought for so long, tried to hold on to hope, but now, with the final judgment in front of her, she realizes she may lose everything. Cut to Michael Carter rushing down the hallway of City Hall, his expression one of rage and determination. His phone rings again. This time it's his chief of staff and his words are clipped, urgent. Sir, the judge has just announced the verdict. It's life in prison. You need to act fast. This is your chance to use your influence, said Cowan. Michael's mind is a storm. The clock is ticking. The woman he loves, the mother of his children, is about to be taken away forever. And yet, what can he do? The moment cuts to the courtroom as Judge Alvin raises his gavel high. I hereby sentence you, Lyla Carter, to life in prison without the possibility of parole, he said coldly. The moment freezes on Lyla's face, her expression a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. The gavel slams down with finality, and the camera cuts quickly to Michael, standing frozen in the hallway, his phone pressed against his ear, the words, life in prison, hanging in the air. The tension is at its peak. The emotional and dramatic stakes are set in stone. What will Michael do next? Can Lyla survive the battle ahead? The viewers are left hanging, eager for the next twist in this high-stakes game of justice, power, and family. The prison doors clang shut behind Lyla Carter with a resounding thud. The sound reverberates in her chest, a cold reminder of her new reality. The life she once knew, the world of her children, her husband, her friends, all of it now feels like a distant dream. The steel bars, the cold concrete, the unforgiving walls, they are no longer just a metaphor for the oppression she's faced all her life. Now, they are her home. She's been swallowed by the system, condemned by a racist judge, a system that has always failed people like her. Lyla never thought she'd be in this place. She thought she'd fight, that the truth would set her free. But truth means nothing here. In this cold, institutionalized nightmare, power and privilege rule the day. And she is nobody. Take comfort in this and ask no extra blessings. Life is a hostile place. Lyla is led down a long hallway, her feet dragging with each step, as the harsh fluorescent lights flicker overhead. She looks at the faces of the women in the cells she passes, their eyes dull and defeated. Some stare at her with indifference, others with sympathy, but none with hope. They all know what it's like to be forgotten by a world that's supposed to offer protection and justice, to be judged before even given a chance. Lyla realizes for the first time that she is not alone in her suffering. This prison is full of women who have all been failed by the same system. They need comfort and support and a measure of acceptance from the world. As the guards unlock her cell, Lyla steps inside, the door clanging shut behind her. She is alone now, alone with her thoughts, alone with the crushing weight of the sentence she's been handed. Lyla collapses onto the cot, her face buried in her hands. A deep, guttural sob escapes her lips, her body shaking with the force of her grief. The reality of it is too much. She was supposed to be at home, cooking dinner for her kids, making sure Jamal was doing his homework, tucking Amara in at night. Now she's a prisoner, a criminal, despite her innocence. The room grows dark as the night settles over the prison. Lyla stares at the cold, bare walls of her cell, her mind drifting back to the moments before her conviction. The faces in the courtroom, the judge's sneering smile, the prosecutor's cold eyes. They haunt her every thought. It all felt like a nightmare. But this is her reality now. Her gaze falls on a photograph she keeps tucked inside her prison uniform. A photograph of her children, Jamal and Amara, smiling in their school uniforms, the picture taken last year during their last family outing at the park. She can almost hear their laughter, the sound of Jamal's high-pitched voice calling out her name, Amara's soft giggle as she twirled around in her dress. Lyla's voice breaks as she whispers their names to herself. Lyla, I'm sorry. I never wanted this for you. I never wanted you to grow up without me. Her heart aches with an unbearable sorrow. She can feel the warmth of her children's embrace in her memory, but now it's just a painful echo. Would they remember her like this? Would they ever understand? Lyla shuts her eyes, trying to block out the image of them crying as they said goodbye, trying to forget the sound of her son's voice, trembling with fear as he asked her why she was being taken away. What did I do to deserve this? The question hangs in the air like a cloud, suffocating her. She wasn't supposed to be here. She didn't deserve this life sentence. But the system that's supposed to protect people like her, had failed her. It had betrayed her in the worst way possible. I did everything right. I raised them. I fought for what was right. Why couldn't they see that? Lyla said to herself as her voice trembled. Lyla's thoughts drift like a current, pulling her back to key moments in her life. The moments when she fought so hard for justice, when she stood up for what she believed in, only to watch it all crumble around her. There was the time she fought against the gentrification project in her neighborhood, the one that threatened to displace her entire community. She'd organized marches, spoken at town hall meetings, worked tirelessly to get the city's leaders to hear their voices. She had faced hostile crowds, hateful words and threats. but she never backed down. She remembers one particular incident, a protest that turned violent, when a group of developers hired a few thugs to intimidate the activists. Lyla had been right in the middle of it, standing tall as they tried to push through, demanding they stop destroying her community. A fight broke out, and she'd been arrested for disturbing the peace, even though it was clear she was only defending herself. Lyla had spent hours in a holding cell that day, but she never let them break her. She fought for what she knew was right, just like she'd always taught her children to do. But when she walked out of that cell, the system had treated her as the criminal. They had written her off, her voice, her beliefs, her actions. Nothing mattered. They were the ones in control, and she was just another statistic in their records. Now, years later, she sees the same thing happening in her own life. She stood up for herself, for her family, for her community, and the system labeled her a criminal anyway. The pacing slows now. We see Lyla lying on her cot, her body exhausted, but her mind racing. Her tear-streaked face is a reflection of her pain, the deep sense of loss and injustice that grips her heart. She lets out a breath, her fingers trembling as she traces the edges of the photo once again. The ache in her chest feels almost unbearable. She whispers the names of her children, her voice a soft murmur. Jamal, Amara, please forgive me. A single tear slips down her cheek, falling onto the photo. She clutches it tightly to her chest, as if holding on to the memory of them can somehow bring her closer to them, even in the distance that now separates them. How could they ever forgive her for failing them? In that moment, Lyla feels the weight of her life's injustice. She sees it clearly now. She's not just fighting for herself, she's fighting for her children, for their future. She's fighting against a system that doesn't see her worth, that doesn't see the worth of people like her. But most of all, she's fighting for the hope that one day, somehow, she'll be able to tell her children that she fought. She fought for them, even when it felt like everything was lost. Lyla stares at the wall of her cell, the darkness of the night pressing against the windows, but it's the light in her heart, in the love she has for her children, that keeps her from giving in to despair. It's the only thing left. Then, slowly, a flicker of resolve appears in her eyes, a spark of defiance that refuses to be extinguished. She's not done yet. The Carter family has been fractured, the pieces scattered across a system that seems designed to crush people like Lyla. But in the heart of this storm, there's Michael Carter, the mayor of Crescent City, a man whose power and influence stretch far beyond the walls of the city, the man who promised to protect his family. Yet up until now, he had been oblivious to the full extent of his wife's suffering. But that changes the moment the verdict is handed down. Michael stands at his desk in the mayor's office, buried under a mountain of paperwork, trying to sort through the endless demands of the city's bureaucracy. His phone rings, a call he's been dreading for days. It's his lawyer. His voice is tight, measured, yet Michael hears the underlying tone of urgency. Mr. Mayor, I have some disturbing news. The case of Lyla Carter, it's worse than we thought. The Judge Alvin Halloway, has not only ignored the evidence in her case, he's been biased from the very beginning. It's not just about this one trial. There's a pattern of corruption, racism, and abuse of power. Michael's world stops. He slams his fist on the desk, the papers scattering as the weight of the truth crashes over him. His wife, the woman he loves and trusts, is in prison because of a corrupt system. A system he thought he could control. A system he thought would protect her. But now he knows the truth. This isn't just about Lyla anymore. It's about every person like her, every woman and man crushed under the weight of injustice. The decision is made. Michael Carter won't sit idly by while his wife suffers. He grabs his coat, storms out of his office, and heads straight for the courthouse. He knows the system well, knows how to navigate the corridors of power, but today, he's not just the mayor. Today, he's a man on a mission, a husband on a mission. As he strides through the courthouse, the energy shifts around him. Staff members scramble to clear the halls, whispers following him like shadows. His presence, his authority, commands the room, but it's not the kind of authority that demands compliance. It's the kind of authority that makes people nervous. Oh, yeah. He finally reaches Judge Alvin Halloway's office, a cold, sterile space that feels far more like a tomb than a place of justice. Michael knocks once, then pushes the door open, his eyes locking on the judge, who is sitting behind his massive oak desk, looking unimpressed. "Judge Halloway," Michael begins, his voice low, simmering with anger. "I'm here to talk about my wife." The judge looks up, his eyes narrowing, a smug smile curling on his lips. "Ah, Mayor Carter. What a surprise. I assume you're here to discuss the verdict." "That's already been decided, and your wife will serve her time." Michael's jaw tightens. "No, not anymore. This isn't about a verdict. This is about you. You've been stacking the deck against her, and it stops now." Halloway leans back in his chair, folding his arms, a mocking expression plastered on his face. "And how do you plan on stopping it, Mr. Mayor? What power do you think you have over the justice system?" Michael's eyes burn with a quiet fury. "You think you can hide behind your robes, behind your position. But you forget one thing. This city is mine, and I'm not going to stand by while you ruin my wife's life, or the lives of anyone else who's been wronged by you." Herzer cupped his eyes on the priest's face, then turned back to master plan. Outside the courthouse, Michael's team is already in motion. Reporters, activists, and citizens begin to gather as news of the showdown spreads like wildfire. The public support for Lyla Carter, for the unjust system she's been subjected to, is building. The people are tired. Tired of corruption, tired of injustice. But the stakes are much higher than Michael had ever imagined. The corruption runs deep. As his lawyer uncovers more about Judge Halloway's hidden ties to powerful criminal figures in the city, Michael realizes that the judge's biases are not just racial, they are personal. Halloway has been accepting bribes, using his position to protect criminals in exchange for money and power. And Lyla was just another victim caught in the crossfire of his greed. Michael calls an emergency press conference. The room is packed with reporters, cameras flashing, microphones thrust into his face. His hands shake slightly, but his voice is steady, resolute. This is not just a case of a wronged woman. This is a systemic issue, a corrupt judge, a system that has failed us all. And in one case, he pauses, the weight of the words settling in. We've all been made victims. But today, we stand up. Today, we fight. The crowd erupts in applause, the energy of the room electric. Michael's words have given the people something they haven't had in years. Hope. Hope that the corrupt system can be toppled. Hope that justice can still be served. As the legal battle intensifies, Michael's investigation into Halloway's past reveals something far more sinister. It turns out that the judge isn't just motivated by money or power. He's been using his position to protect his own dark secrets. Halloway is involved in a human trafficking ring, using his influence to make sure investigations into his crimes are buried. He's committed more crimes than he can drag himself to. Along with the lives of rich people like Beth Polkman, renders her case more dangerous for many people. Lyla wasn't just a random target. She had unknowingly uncovered something much bigger. A dangerous conspiracy involving several high-profile figures in the city, and the judge was willing to go to any lengths to make sure it stayed hidden. The walls close in on Halloway, but he isn't done yet. He's fighting back. He uses his connections to manipulate the legal system, trying to bury any evidence that could incriminate him. But Michael won't let him get away with it. He takes to the streets, rallying the people, calling for justice, pressuring the system until it cracks. He puts down murder beyond borders and even breaks nations. Well made the spectacle that was Berlin, and certainly afterwards the movement, most importantly. The climax builds to a breathtaking finale. Michael and his team work around the clock to gather evidence, securing key witnesses who testify about Halloway's corruption. The pressure mounts as Michael prepares to present his case before the court. It's all or nothing now. The judge knows that if this case is exposed, his entire career and life will be destroyed. In a final desperate move, Halloway tries to flee, but it's too late. Michael Carter has won. Lyla's conviction is overturned, and she is released from prison, walking out into the light of freedom once again. The people cheer. The battle is won, but the war is far from over. The corrupt system may have been shaken, but it's still standing, ready to fight back. But for now, Lyla is free, and that's all that matters. The Carter family is whole again, their love for each other stronger than ever as they face the uncertain future together. In the quiet, dimly lit office of Michael Carter, the mayor of Crescent City sits at his desk, poring over documents. His eyes are bloodshot, his mind still racing from the weeks of relentless pressure, meetings, and strategy sessions. The battle for justice has cost him dearly: time, sleep, and, perhaps, pieces of his soul. But there's something else. A spark of hope. His lawyer Carlos Green walks in, holding a manila folder, the weight of it far heavier than the paper suggests. Carlos doesn't need to say a word. Michael stands up immediately, his body tense as he waits for the news. "I found something," Carlos says quietly, placing the folder down in front of Michael. His hands tremble as he opens it. Inside are new forensic results, hidden testimonies from witnesses who had been too afraid to come forward earlier. It's the breakthrough they've been waiting for. A forensic expert has corroborated the mother's story. The evidence that would have exonerated her was there all along, buried under a pile of lies and deceit, covered up by the corrupt judicial system. Lyla's DNA evidence proves that she was not at the scene of the crime. The surveillance footage, long thought to have been lost, has been recovered. It was never her. It's enough to reopen the case. Michael looks up at Carlos, the air between them thick with disbelief and triumph. "Are we sure this is it?" he asks, almost in a whisper. Carlos nods, and in that moment, the weight of weeks of fighting, of sleepless nights, of endless pressure seems to lift. They have the truth, they have the evidence, and now they can prove that Lyla Carter is innocent. The sun is just beginning to set on Crescent City as Lyla Carter steps out of the prison gates. For the first time in what feels like years, her feet meet the world outside. A world that had once been taken from her, torn apart by a system that didn't see her, didn't believe her. But now, she is free. As she walks toward the gates, the sound of chains dragging against the concrete floor has been replaced by the soft footsteps of freedom. Her heart is pounding in her chest, the adrenaline rushing through her veins. The once cold steel walls of the prison seem to melt away behind her, like a bad dream retreating into the past. And then, standing at the other side of the gates, waiting for her, are her children, her precious son Jordan and her daughter, Amara. Their faces are a mixture of disbelief and joy, their eyes wide with wonder as they run toward her. For the first time in years, she sees their faces without the shadow of fear, without the hopelessness that had once consumed them. When she reaches them, the moment feels like a slow-motion embrace. Jordan's arms wrap around her first, his small body shaking with emotion. Then Amara follows, clutching her mother as if she might disappear again if she lets go. Lyla holds them both, feeling their warmth, their love, the very thing that had kept her alive through the nightmare. "I knew you'd come back to us," Amara whispers into her mother's ear, the tears streaming down her face. "I knew you were innocent." Lyla closes her eyes, tears flooding her own, as she kneels down to face her children. "I'm so sorry I had to leave you," she whispers, barely able to speak through the lump in her throat. "But I'm back now, and I'll never leave again." The camera pulls back to capture this scene of raw emotion, a mother reunited with her children, whole again after years of separation. The world has been unjust to them, but in this moment, They have each other. They are free. Across the city, a different scene is unfolding in the courtroom, a place that had once felt like the graveyard of Lyla's hopes. In the weeks since the breakthrough, Michael and his legal team have mounted a full investigation into Judge Alvin Halloway, exposing not only his racial bias, but the depths of his corruption. Halloway's resignation comes swiftly, as public outcry grows. He is removed from his position with immediate effect. News outlets blast the headlines. Corrupt judge fired amid scandal. Systemic racism exposed in Crescent City Court. But for Lyla, this victory feels bittersweet. Yes, the judge is gone. Yes, her conviction is overturned, and the system has been forced to reckon with its own demons. But the scars remain. No amount of public disgrace can erase the years that were stolen from her life. No apology can bring back the lost moments, the quiet dinners, the school plays, the birthday parties. Michael watches the news unfold, standing at the window of his office, reflecting on everything they've been through. The fight isn't over. The system, the one that failed his wife, his children, and so many others, still needs to change. And as he watches his family drive off into the distance, finally whole, he knows that his battle is far from finished. A long and uphill battle he believes has happened on Earth before, and maybe left a trace of its effect. Later that night, Michael stands in front of a crowd of supporters, in the same building where his fight for justice began. The campaign speeches are over, and the accolades are fading, but this moment isn't about applause. It's about a promise. He steps up to the podium, his eyes scanning the faces in the crowd. Lyla, standing at his side, smiles at him, a quiet understanding between them. She knows the weight of his words, just as he knows the weight of hers. We've won today, but there are more battles to fight. There are more families like ours out there, people who have been wronged by a system that doesn't protect them. I will not rest until justice is not a privilege for the powerful, but a right for everyone. This fight isn't just about my wife. It's about every single one of you who has ever felt the sting of injustice. The crowd erupts in applause, but Michael's face is resolute. He doesn't smile, not yet. There's too much left to do. Lyla reaches for his hand, and the two of them stand there, side by side, united not just as a family, but as symbols of hope. The city that betrayed them has now seen a glimpse of its own reckoning. As the camera pulls away, we see the Carter family, reunited and stronger than ever, driving off into the horizon, their future uncertain but full of possibility. Their battle for justice has been won, but the emotional scars, the pain of the past, will linger forever. "Interpreter," Lightspeed said, near the Acropolis of the south side of the city. And somewhere, in the dark corners of the city, Judge Halloway watches from the shadows, knowing that his empire of corruption has crumbled. He may have been removed from his position, but the power of the system he helped maintain will never truly vanish. The fight is far from over. What do you think it takes to change a corrupt system? Can true justice ever be achieved when power and racism are involved? The fight for justice is never easy. It's a battle that demands not only courage, but persistence. But can one person really change the system? Can they outsmart corruption? And when the system fails, who will rise to challenge it? What does it take for justice to truly prevail? Tell us what you think. What would it take to change the system? Can we truly achieve justice when power and racism are involved? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. Like, comment, and share this story to help spread the truth. Let's keep fighting for what's right. But this is just the beginning. Stay tuned for more shocking stories of justice and injustice. The truth isn't always what it seems, but we're here to uncover it. Coming soon, more stories, more battles, and more moments that will make you question everything. Remember, Justice is a fight that never ends. Don't let it fade into silence.